Well, here we are today with Daniel Fitzsimmons, who's just finished his first feature, sci-fi drama, Native. So first thing, Daniel, hello.
Hello.
And can you tell me, firstly, what everyone wants to know, what inspired you to make your first feature film?
Yeah, so when I came back from USC, where I was at film school, I did my masters in film production, I was in a bit of a rut. I moved back and I was working in commercial filmmaking and leading quite a comfortable existence, but it wasn't what I wanted to do really. So I made the decision to move to London and completely separate myself from that side of the industry. So I started teaching in a high school, teaching French and Spanish in Dagenham. Which
in Dagenham as well,
yeah,
places.
Yeah, which was brilliant, completely separate, but always with the idea that in the long term, this is what I still wanted to do. I wanted to somehow find a way of not making short films anymore, not making commercials or being involved in the corporate side of filmmaking, but making a feature film. So I didn't know what that was going to be, and as a company, my production company, we'd raised a little bit of money on another project. We didn't get anywhere near what we needed to make the film that we'd raised the money on. But we did have a little bit which we were going to lose if we didn't find something that could be made for the money that we'd raised. So we got our heads together. I had an idea for a short film, a sci-fi short film set on a spaceship. Neil Atkinson, who's my writing partner, convinced me that it was that, first of all, there was no market for short films because as good as they are, nobody really watches them. I mean, people do, but only within the industry itself. I
totally agree. I mean, I think when digitisation came along, people thought all of a sudden it was going to open it up. But the simple fact is people will either commit. There's something psychologically.
Yeah.
They will commit to 2 or 3 minutes, or they will commit to a couple of hours.
Yeah.
In between, it's a TV program length.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
So it's actually, I understand.
Yeah.
Why you didn't now. Yeah.
So even though that idea was formed as a short film, the practicalities of spending that amount of money on a short film, it was never going to work. So, but he was always convinced that the idea was a feature film anyway. So we fleshed it out. We extrapolated the basics of the story, which was based on the twin paradox. There's a Heinlein novel called Time for the Stars, which is about... Do you know the twin paradox? Do you know what that is?
No, tell us. I think a lot of our readers will be happy to hear about that. Yeah.
So the twin paradox, in layman's terms, because I'm a layman and I can't really go into it in any more detail than that, it's to do with the theory of relativity. So if you've got a twin on Earth and then you send the other one at the speed of light into the far reaches of the universe, because they're travelling so fast, time passes slower for them. So that if they were to come back in 90 years, 80 years, the twin on Earth will have aged 80, 90 years, but they will have only aged 10 years, 5 years. And this is it's not just theory. Well, we've never tested it. No one's ever tested it, but it's going to be true, you know. Yeah. So that idea was fascinating to me.
Okay.
And that's where the genesis of the idea came from. Having read the novel as well, and decided to use that part of it to make something really simple with twins, with a small cast, a confined location, which is a spaceship moving at the speed of light across the universe, and then, you know, giving them a mission. What are they going to go and do? And then out of that, that's where the idea of who these people were, what the society was, how they had the scientific technology and capabilities to go and explore or conquer another
as I saw
planet.
It as well, they sort of almost they want to take their kind to another part of the universe. It's not quite divide and conquer. There's an element of of wanting to assert their own individual species somewhere else rather than actually being aggressive about it.
Bees do this.
Yeah.
Where bees in a hive will go out and they'll send a couple of scouts to another hive that they want to take over.
Yeah.
And obviously the bee thing was visually and metaphorically in terms of the hive and what the society is now. It functions almost as a hive mind telepathically as well. Was something that we were able to flesh out who these people were through that. Obviously, like a lot of background reading on North Korea and similar insular societies where it's all for the greater good and the collective versus the individual and things like that. That's what I was getting into at the time of writing it. Working in the school system at the same time, moving to London for the first time and how you sort of become part of something much
hive.
Bigger than you've ever, because I've lived all over the place, but I think London is quite overwhelming in that sense, in that I lived in LA, but you're in a car all the time, so as massive as it is, there is a sense of you as an individual, and you cut your own path, and you kind of can suit yourself in day to day a lot more, whereas in London you are part of this huge move and mass all the time, and I think that was something that I was interested in. And then so after having dug into all of that, simplified the idea, written the script to a pre-arranged budget, then we were able to start to think about it as a realistic prospect. And that was when I met with Jen Handorf, who's co-producer on this, who had made similar low budget films in London before. And we teamed up, and then that's when it started to become a realistic prospect to shoot that summer.
Something else, you're talking obviously like somebody who does know about screenwriting. From what you've chosen, the classic thing that a low budget filmmaker chooses, you've chosen a small cast, confined space, and a story that's quite linear and simple, even though it's got high concepts around it. Now, what is your background? You've touched on the fact that you did film production in California, but what's your writing background?
Yeah, so I was a screenwriter before I went to film school. Neil and I had our first script option when I was in my early 20s, by a producer called Andy Patterson, who made Girl with a Pearl Earring and Hillary and Jackie. And Andy's an absolute star. Like he sort of became my mentor figure through the industry from those early days. We worked together on a few things, nothing that we did though, including the film that we worked together with Andy on, ever went into production. And that film was a much bigger budget, had a huge ensemble cast, loads of locations. It was with a couple of different directors on the road towards getting it made, which never eventually happened. So when it didn't go into production finally, in about 2007 was when we kind of admitted defeat on it.
I'll just interject there. You never defeat; it just goes dormant.
Yeah, and no, that's true. And
a good story was always a good story.
It's a great, it's a script that I'm hugely proud of.
It sounds like you put some real hard work into it.
Yeah, the three of us did. Neil, myself, and Andy worked really, really hard on it, and it's a really good script that I'm really proud of. Whether it's something I would choose to direct now is a different matter, because you move on and your motivations and your interests change. And
exactly. As a fellow screenwriter, my next question is that you also have learned, and I listened to what you said about the fact that you have to think about production when you're writing, especially if you're an independent filmmaker.
Yeah. What
would be your dream now as a writer?
Yeah,
to write without constraints.
I think it's hard.
I
don't think writing without constraints is ever good, and I don't think that's ever. I think it's good to know the parameters in which you're working, because I think that's how you become liberated, and I think then you start to prioritise the tools that you have at your disposal.
Yeah.
Going back to that script though with Andy, that was quite a bruising experience, because I realised like the realities of getting a film made and how difficult that is, and it was a comedy as well. Right. So I after coming out of that, after coming through USC, I realised that if I was going to do this, I really needed to be clever, not cynical, but I needed to know what the market was. And
I think that's very wise. The other thing is where you touched on genre there by saying comedy. Are you a big fan of sci-fi, or did that just come along with this particular project?
No, I am a massive fan of sci-fi, and I'm glad that I ended up working in that genre as my first film, because I am really comfortable in it, and I know without it, I always assumed sci-fi was a big budget enterprise, which I realised, once I had the script, I mean, it was a good story first, and then I mean, the fact that it was a sci-fi almost comes second. But when you're thinking about the logistics of how are you gonna create it and then try and sell it, you need to know at any level of budget, you need to know what that path's going to be. Yeah. And the reality was, as a screenwriter, that never had to be my concern, but as a director, kind of particularly working along with the producers on it, I really needed to know that all the decisions that I was making had a purpose, and there was a reason behind them.
Would you sort of, I mean, you're talking about somebody who's really quite informed, would you say then that one of the best things you can have if you're at start-up level making your first feature film is a decent script? I mean, all right, we know that runs through the industry generally, a good script ends up being a good film, but would you say it's really the most important thing, that you studied hard at writing and you've got a track record as an experienced writer? Would you say that really helped you when you got into production? Yeah,
you've got to. I think you've got to. I think it's the most important thing, because your job as a director is to communicate what's on the page to absolutely everybody else who's in that room or on that location on that given day. And if you're unsure of it, if it doesn't work, then you're not going to be able to communicate it well enough.
And that brings me very neatly onto the question of casting. You have I think, one of Britain's kind of undersung, very talented actors. Tell me the journey about getting Rupert Graves on board.
So Rupert's a friend of mine.
That's very simple then.
And we've got very similar tastes in what we like. We in film and in music and anything creative, really, we're kind of on the same page. So I knew that this would chime with him. Rupert is, I mean, he's built a little studio in his back garden where he's got all this recording things and stuff. So I've been over to his to play all his guitars and stuff like that. So I knew he had him. He's quite musically minded. The lead character in this, it's about his journey of self-discovery through through hearing music for the first time and what that is. And I think that chimes with him on a quite a primal
you can tell
level.
That it's as if that role sort of spoke to him a bit. I know it's a grand way of putting it, but there is that element that, although it's a well-crafted sci-fi drama, that you can just tell that there's something about actors when they really leap into a role, he is really giving it his all, in a way that when you see an accomplished performance perhaps in another film, you don't see, actors have their range, but you kind of get the feeling sometimes, when an actor has a real personal interest in a role, and so that makes sense to me that it was about the music, because music is a massive thing.
Yeah, and I suppose I really didn't realise that when I was writing it.
So that was
the music was almost an incidental part of what was driving the story. And then only when I sent it to him and we spoke about it, then I realised the importance of that for him in finding that character and in creating that character. So then, once we had that conversation, then I knew that I really had to do that part of it justice, you know. And I mean, in one sense, the clarity of Kane's character's arc through the film. I don't like saying arc, but it doesn't really know the words to use.
It's just one of those arty words you have to use every now and again.
But the clarity and the linear
it was quite subtly done, I felt, as well. Watching it from an audience perspective for the first time, what you go on the journey as they're like two little, as you say, they're like the two little worker bees going out into a scout mission, you know, and you think, well, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And then slowly this thing about the music and the noise and the way that his brain suddenly starts going into meltdown and all of it is, and I won't say any more, of course, but it's beautifully structured, that dramatic arc, if I might say. Yeah, so well done on that.
Thanks. I mean, the credit has to go to the actors on that, really, because as I say, the linear motion of what Kane goes through as a character is quite, you know, that drives the narrative. We are comfortable with that, I think. What Ellie had to do was much more nuanced and there's a subtlety to her performance which had to work to counter what Rupert was going through in his. So I wouldn't say, like, I think they both should have equal billing here, because I think they both in very different ways what they do and how we watch them and judge them as an audience is really, I mean, it really is complex, I think, and that's why it reminded me
it was as strong dramatically, although it's a totally different film and a totally different feeling, in the same way, and everybody who reads this will know this, but it's in the same way that Morgan Freeman and Tom, what's his name?
Tim Robbins.
Yes, you know what I'm going to say.
Is it Tim Robbins?
Yeah, it is Tim Robbins. Yeah, and the way they are in The Shawshank Redemption, one cannot exist without the other. So although, you know, everyone goes, oh no, Morgan Freeman's the main one. You go, no, actually he isn't.
Yeah.
He's the support character.
Yeah.
And it's almost, you know, in your film you've got this lovely power balance. So although Rupert Graves is the better known actor, you very soon, when you start watching it, she really holds on to the description of the hive mind character.
Yeah.
And that's really hard for an actor to do, because for them not to ad-lib and swish around and want to break out, which most actors do when they're given a good character.
Yeah.
But that was the character. It's a very locked-off character. So that, in actual fact, is quite hard for her to do.
Yeah, completely. And that's where working with great actors, you come to see it in the cutting room when you're watching it back, and the stuff that they're giving you, which you never even maybe... You might have missed on the day, and they're given, and seeing that through the monitor, you realise the nuance of performance, which really does, particularly in our film where a lot of it does take place in close up. You know, that determines where the audience is going to go with these characters, and you know, it was never a case of heroes and villains in this. It was never a case of any kind of sexual relationship, because that's not what the film's about. It always had to be this they're debating
a moral and a thematic issue, basically, which is what I find so cool, and is what is the essence of sci-fi. It's what sci-fi is all about, no matter what genre you stick it on. You know, people say, oh, sci-fi is a genre. It sort of is, but then you can have thrillers, dramas, everything, you know, with the sci-fi. Yeah, for it to be, for it to have that kind of Samuel Beckett-like rhythm through the piece, they had to be equals. They had to be on the same footing going into this, so that when that power balance starts to shift and change, that's when, as an audience, we become more invested in how it's going to end up. Yeah, well, you do.
And I think that was the crucial thing in getting the performances that we did from Rupert and Ellie, which makes the film something that I'm, you know, really proud of, because it worked, because they work.
You know, I also might say that the first 15 minutes of the film, you do a brave thing. you take your time setting it up, which you could have done with a you could have done it easy. You could have done it with a galaxy far, far away or whatever, but you didn't. You did it through visual and dialogue and that kind of in the moment exposition, which is actually quite hard to do, especially when you've got a sci-fi world.
Yeah.
And after about 15 minutes in, as somebody obviously that knows about, is a screenwriter as you know as well, you think, where's this going? And then just as you're about to kind of go, well, where is it leading?
Yeah.
It starts to take off, and then you go, aha, and then you're right along with the ride. So that initial 15 minutes investment really pays off, and then it's rare in that way, because although it's sort of got a 3-act structure to it, the middle act is actually where it really zooms up, you know, and a lot of the stuff happens.
Yeah, there was a lot to set up, and the original, one of the early drafts of the script would have been 40 pages longer than what we ended up shooting, because what I wanted to do is to spend more time showing the society on a bigger scale. And if I'd have had the money, I'd have loved to have done it.
And I can see that.
And without giving too much away about the ending, to bookend that ideal intro would have been nice on the back end when they get to the destination, and there was a lot more in there. And if someone wants to give us a few million pounds to go and remake it, then the necessities of what we were playing with really had to we had to hone what we had, and we had to work out a way of thinking in terms of building a whole other grand society with not very much money. So that was the toughest part of putting the story together.
Most stretched part.
Yeah, because if you're showing someone a society and a world, then you've kind of got to, unless you literally do that, you've got to think of other ways. And also don't forget as well, the way these people function is a lot different to the way we work and communicate, and if you push that too far, then that will alienate an audience because they won't know why they're watching this stilted communication style. So it was a tough one. It was a tough one for us, but it's a tough one for the actors as well. They went with it, and I think it just about works.
Thanks for telling us about Native, and which we wish you every success with. But what have you got lined up coming up next?
I'm working on a sci-fi project in the US, which is very exciting with a friend of mine. I've been developing that for the last year, which is I'm really excited about. There's a Liverpool-based thing that I'd like to do at some stage. But that's under wraps at the moment because I'm speaking to a few people about it. And then I'm working on an adaptation of an Irish novel called Nothing on Earth.
Okay.
I'm adapting that with the author, Conor O'Callaghan, which is a really exciting adaptation of a almost Lynchian mystery thriller, I suppose, set on a ghost estate in the middle of Ireland.
That sounds really cool.
And the novel is fantastic. I really recommend it. And if we get to do it as a movie, then I'm sure it'll be just as exciting.
In the meantime, every success with Native, and it's been really great talking to you, and well done on the first feature.
Thank you. Thanks, Jane. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye now.